Okay, hi everybody online.
Is it possible to also touch on how to hopefully decrease a kid's lashing out on a sibling?
Yes, totally. Okay, great.
Angry or upset.
Yes.
Or a parent.
Yes, lashing out. Okay, great. So welcome everybody online. We are here in person, and I was just getting some points from all the parents in the room about what they're hoping to get out of the workshop tonight, and specifically what they're wanting to learn. So I'll catch you guys up on this. So how to decrease arguments, how to increase patience as a parent, working with your child when they're in the middle of something that is usually emotional, I'm guessing, and then also how to work with in supporting the child's patience towards themselves when they can't get a task correctly. Talking about just the full spectrum of punishment, reward, and then what's the difference between natural consequences and logical consequences, and how to kind of begin to think about what system works well for you as a parent and for your child. And then you were talking about lashing out on siblings, lashing out on parents, I'm guessing is also happening. At least that it goes both ways in our household. Nobody gets out of that equation. So lashing out. And people online, please feel free to type in, and I'll check in with Herbie around what other, things that you're wanting to get out of the workshop. Anything else here before we get started? All right. Well, I'll give a short intro, and then I'll check in with the folks online. First of all, thank you so much for making it all the way out here. As I mentioned to the crowd of parents here in the room, that it is a really challenging time to step away from home life, and it's also the only time potentially in the week that you can step away. So I know that comes with a sacrifice, it comes with a cost, sometimes even financially, but definitely emotionally and logistically. So just take a moment and acknowledge everything you had to do in order to get here, and the extra energy it took to kind of break out of the routine this evening. And give yourself a good congratulations, even if the house is on fire and the children are screaming, because you made it happen and you're here. And I hope that this time is really worth your while. So my name is Carly Malatic. I am a trauma therapist. I work with adults and previously worked with teens, and have found as a parent myself, a parent of a 5-year-old boy and a 2.5-year-old boy, my husband and I were not prepared for what parenting has invited us into in terms of emotional learning and just working with our own nervous systems and working with our children's nervous system and just trying to find a way to connect. And so this workshop came about because I connected with Teacher Kim. My son Matthias used to go to school here, and we just had a great conversation, and out of that conversation was like, would a workshop around this topic, boundaries, be something that we could do? And I was like, yes, that is exactly what I'd love to do. So I'm here to learn with you guys and alongside of you. I don't consider myself an expert in this area. I consider myself someone who's really done a lot of reading, a lot of application, a lot of workshops, and then talks to a lot of my colleagues about this work. So I just really see this as like a resource. Here's kind of the best information that I found, and here's how to maybe start the dialogue in your family and figuring out what's right for you. I don't know what is right, obviously, for each and every family, and so I hope you feel really empowered to trust yourself and to recognize when I'm talking about something that applies to your kid, and also when it doesn't, because I think we're also working with a really wide spectrum of kids in this room, and you know your kid best. So that's a bit about me. I'll check in with Kirby. Was there any questions or anything that people wanted to get out of this workshop online?
Not yet.
Okay, great. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump right in. Everybody, can you grab a sheet of paper on your table? And if you're online and able to grab a sheet of paper with a pen or a marker, please do. And if you can't, you're listening with earbuds in your ear, or you're cooking dinner or whatever, don't worry about it. The we did this workshop last year, there is going to be some overlap and there's going to be some new stuff. So it's all good reminders for all of us. So let's go ahead and just think about some of the things that are different in our current day and age of parenting than in the past. And I want to focus on a few areas. So one is play, the other is emotions, and then the third is just engagement and involvement. I want you to kind of map out, just draw a circle here, what you felt like you experienced as a child with your parents, the amount of play, and the amount of play you give as a parent. So just draw a circle. How big is the circle you were given as a child around like attention with play and engagement, emotions, attention to anger, sadness, disappointment, frustration, and then just like overall kind of like well-being, like attentiveness, attunement. And just draw out whatever size your circles are. It's okay, if you draw it out differently. Some people might have two circles here. Like I received a lot of play in this area and a little bit in this area. A lot of attention was given and attunement to this type of emotion, but little to these emotions. You can get as detailed or sort of general as you'd like.
Speaking about engagement,
Yeah.
what exactly do you mean by engagement? How engaged they were?
Yeah, just like attuned, and just in general, like how much do you feel like your parents spent being like, are we giving them everything they need? Like engagement towards needs. Let's get really specific there, yeah. And I know that's a loaded question and it's tricky to answer, but just in general, this is just for your self-reflection. And if you're with a partner, go ahead and glance over at their sheet, if it's okay. Oh, yes, and if your partner doesn't want to be glanced at. All right, so let's go ahead and share. What did you guys notice? What stood out to you around what you experienced as a child and then what you give as a parent? Go ahead.
We deal a lot more intentionally with emotions, talking about them, and the big ones and the scary ones and all of that, much more than when I was little.
Yes, totally. How many people in the room feel like that's true for you? Yeah, I see a lot of hands. Okay. Yes, thank you for sharing. Go ahead, right here.
When you spoke about like differentiating, there was a lot of like talking about good emotions.
Uh-huh.
But I noticed when I was a child, there was a lot of like reflection of like if you're angry, like oh it's okay, like,
Yeah.
don't cry, don't be angry, deflecting that rather
Totally.
than letting me feel that.
Yes.
So yeah, big difference there where when my son is angry or upset, like we let him feel that and then
Yes.
try to handle it after and don't try to tell him like don't cry or
Yeah.
be angry.
Totally. Okay. So noticing small capacity for negative emotions, larger capacity for positive emotion. Great. Yeah. What else? One other person.
I noticed specifically, because I kind of misheard the instruction, but I was thinking about like the way I was raised versus the way I'm trying to raise my daughter. And I think the thing that I picked up on more than anything was that I'm trying to make sure that the lessons that I were taught are passed forward, and the things that I didn't get, I'm trying to do more of.
Yes.
So like
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. So play, like this is another great example. Like we're just kind of noticing some trends here, right? So play being smaller as a child, just in the form of individual one-on-one play, and then play as a parent, individual, or like kind of family-focused play being larger. But then some of this like engagement as a family also being really large. So we can kind of begin to see these differences and these shifts that have started to happen over time. And I think that sometimes it can feel like it's never enough in all of these areas. And why I kind of show this is because in general, like we don't often give ourselves credit, and that's not in comparison to throw our parents under the bus, because I think they did some things, frankly, much better than I have done. But it's to really look at what you are doing and what you are learning and what you are bringing forward in the next generation in your family. And that takes energy. So if you're tired, it's because these circles are bigger. And they're bigger for good reason, because you've been putting more work into it. So now let's go ahead and take a moment to think about, we're going to get into now the boundaries piece. And this piece is really important because we need to also look at our history before we look at how we implement boundaries. And so when I was a child, and somebody implemented a boundary, a parent, a caregiver, or something, I had an experience of that boundary, whether it was verbally or then also physically, how that boundary was implemented. And every time somebody implemented a boundary, this is how our nervous system works, is we get an imprint in our system that tells us, oh, this is something I've learned, stay away from this, stay close to this, this is what this means. There's a felt sense in our body of boundaries. And that's different for each and every person that we kind of met with, teachers, whatnot. And so we have all of these layered imprints. Inside of our brain and inside of our body, there's a highway that moves from our body up to our brain. There's neurons and nervous system, and then there's a highway that moves from our brain down into our body. And our brain stem, right here at the back of the brain, that's where all that information is encoded along with our hippocampus. And that's really close, the hippocampus is really close to smell, so that's why when you walk into a room and if you smell something, suddenly you'll have like this memory and you're like, oh, like Grandma's kitchen, 1990, apple pie, like I'm back there, right? And the image and all that. That's just one of those. That's a positive imprint. But we also have positive and negative imprints of boundaries. So I want you to go ahead and take a moment and just think of like 3 people who had strong impact with how they set boundaries for you. And if you can think of one positive or neutral person, that would be great. If you don't, that's okay. But just kind of like, who were the 3 primary people? And I know for me, it was my mom, my dad, and my grandma. Those were 3 people. So if you don't have anyone that comes to mind, just go ahead and think about those 3 people and just kind of begin to map out just those layers. I'll give you guys just a minute here. So as you've thought of those 3 people, or maybe they haven't come to mind, I want you to kind of place these 3 people on the spectrum. And we've got non-existent boundaries over here. That's somebody who really didn't have any sense of boundaries. We all have boundaries because we all get to the point of anger and frustration, and then we step in, our body literally physically steps in and is like, no, we can't do this. So everybody has a boundary, but this sort of N represents someone who's they're easily blown over. It's like there's a sense of collapse, that sort of thing. Here is where there's very harsh and rigid boundaries. I'm just gonna put to the means of abuse. Okay, so super firm, hard, came down. It was very clear, quick. And then there's this middle space where it's firm, and loving. Okay? And then there's kind of these in-between spaces, which is like maybe floppy, a little bit unpredictable, and then there's maybe like more rigid and scary, but not ouch. And I think what's hard about this is you can have somebody who's on every single point in the spectrum, and it's okay to note that. Okay, that would be called unpredictable boundaries within your household. So just kind of jot down. For me, my grandmother was right here. My dad was over here to like say here to here. He had a spectrum when he needed to and wanted to lay down some firm boundary. And then my mom was kind of somewhere in this range. Okay? All right. So, the reality is when we go to set a boundary with our children, we have all of these people and those imprints from that childhood that we had inside of us. Okay? So there is a lot of noise often going on when we go to set a boundary. And there can be a lot, not only of our biology, but then also of our history that's being layered on in that moment. And what we're trying to do in our adult brain is to see through all of these layers and into actually the child that we have right in front of us and the context and the environment. This is like a tree that is actually happening. So it's a lot to kind of work through in that moment, which is why this can feel so loaded. So if depending on your history, I mean, we all could use, like I'd say, 8 sessions on this with a therapist. So if some of this content coming up tonight, you're like, wow, like there's a lot here. I could talk to someone about that. It's great. You don't have to do therapy like long term. You can go and read a book and talk about it with someone for 8 sessions and begin to really work through your nervous system and figuring out what's happening in that moment, because I guarantee you there's something happening in your little person and also in your adult self at the same time, and that kind of creates this power dynamic even within inside of ourselves that our children are also picking up on. So I say this not to add more work, but actually to validate why this is hard, and why it's nuanced, and then it changes with every age our child gets. So any thoughts here? I'm just curious. What are your reflections? What stands out to you?
We may have some low emotional intelligence that we need to work on.
Yeah, she just shared that we may have some low emotional intelligence that we need to work on. Yeah, your kid is still in you, right? Like they had some boundaries that were set in a way that I'm guessing didn't feel super great. And there maybe even as an adult, we're trying to fill this gap between how our parents set boundaries and how we want to set boundaries. And that's a big gap. Right? There might actually not have been a lot of people that modeled what you're trying to do. And so your brain and your body is holding on to your past, and with all these question marks of like, okay, how do I do this now in the present moment when I haven't actually lived and felt this, but I know it in my cognitive brain, my prefrontal cortex. But the thing is when we're stressed, our cognitive brain goes offline. And that is why we don't think of these things, and that is why we reenact what we were given as a child. So the healing comes in then is understanding what happened to me as a kid. How can I slow that down and pause and feel that I'm an adult now into my whole adult body, and begin to slow down and recognize like that event that happened in the past is not happening right now. I have the intensity of that, and I might even carry and want to reenact the intensity of that. But if I learn some tools around this, if I can be validated in my experience, that intensity can go down and we can begin to see more clearly, and that cognition can come more and more online. Thank you for saying that. Yeah. Any other reflections on this? hardship. There was a reason why parenting was the way it was, and there's a reason why parenting is the way it is today. And our kids are going to tell us all the things that we needed to do differently too. So we're in this lineage too. So I think there's a lot of compassion that we can have looking backwards, looking internally, and even looking forwards, knowing that this continues, the learning continues. Yeah.
And then just to kind of further complicate the complexity of these moments and situations, if you have any of those three people in, with you at that time, and you're trying to bring in, okay, this is all old stuff, I'm trying, and then you have their opinions to work with, and it's
Totally. Yeah, this is so well said. If anyone didn't hear this online, she's just talking about how and if any of these three people, my dad, my mom, my grandparent, is in the room while I'm trying to do this, there's even more energy around the old pattern, and then the pressure to try and come up with something new. So yes. Yeah, go ahead.
The thing that stands out about this to me is also the fact that today, societally, everybody's worried about the thing.
Yeah.
Life. And so I think how we parent in the moment, we're already stressed because we're worried, did I say that right? Did that come out right? Did these people think I'm being some monster when I'm just trying to keep, trying not to, break down for 5 seconds and or whatever the situation
Yes.
is. And it's there's billions of stressors that exist outside of waking up in the morning, and if we can't, it reminds me of why it's really important to be able to really decide what's important in the moment, so that way I can focus on what I need to do.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The slowing down is key here. I mean, it just it never gets old. It's the hardest thing to do, but if you walk out with any skill, it's just slow down. And I think this other piece around judgment is that there's an energy to that, right? There's a feeling to that. Even you guys are gonna go out and the kids are gonna be running right outside of little Acorn, and somebody's gonna need to put down a boundary, and everyone's gonna watch, and that parent is just gonna die inside. I remember I gave this workshop, and then the very next day my 2.5-year-old would not get in his car seat, and so he was just screaming bloody murder, and I was just doing all the things that I said to do, but I wanted to die inside of my body and completely disappear. And it wasn't because I even thought I was doing something wrong, but there's a very strong part of this is this should not be happening. And learning how to regulate through that feeling of a feeling is happening that we were not allowed to have, or a feeling is showing up now that there wasn't space for it culturally and within the context of our families. That desire to squash that is still in me, even though I know all of this. And so it's can we be really kind and compassionate? Can we smile at each other? Can we chuckle? Can we laugh at ourselves? And know that it's actually okay. We're just working with a lot of energy in our systems. Okay. So let's jump in and really figure this out then. How can we begin to break down what a boundary is, what a boundary isn't, so that in the moment there's a little bit more clarity and hopefully trust with your own instincts. And also some areas where you want to grow. So as you kind of think about this, just keep in mind all of that is real, and you're holding all of that we just wrote on top of everything that you're learning. So you're going to go back and forth between kind of holding and processing what you had in your past and then what you're trying to implement. And I can't recommend, I think Becky Kennedy's book is really great, Good Inside, and there's so many other parenting books as well that really begin to kind of break this down. So let's get clear. We're going to do the who, the what. Let me write this here. Who, let's start that. It sounds silly, but who is the boundary? All right. So I used to think that boundaries, as a parent, when I put them down, was something that I was pointing to out in the external environment. The boundary is out there. So if I was with my 5-year-old and there was a street and there's a sidewalk, and I yelled or said very clearly, do not cross the sidewalk into the street, I was setting the boundary. The thing is, though, my 5-year-old, he does not care about the sidewalk. The sidewalk's not going to stop him from going into the street, and the street is not going to stop him from going into the street. So my verbal command, well, with my parents, I think this did have authority. It doesn't carry as much authority with our children on some levels. And so the boundary really is me. I am the boundary. And the biggest thing is, number one, my body is the boundary. So if I'm not willing to move my body and I'm not willing to do something, my child can hear that in my tone and likely knows the boundary isn't going to be held. So we have to, I think, be willing to put our body into it a lot more than what we maybe have hoped. And so an example of that is like, right, if I'm yelling at my child from the other side of the room, you need to get off the couch, you're about to break something up there, it's not safe, that's really different than if I come up to him, I've asked you 3 times, this is why, it's dangerous, please get off the couch. Okay, I'm going to take you off the couch. He feels the boundary there and how I touch and how I contact him. Now, this is what's hard is because many of us in our past, when there was touch and contact sometimes involved, it meant like grabbing and shoving, right, down. And it's like, how do we do the same motion with that sense of confidence and authority? So a boundary is your body, and then inside of your body is your energy, right? It's your tone, and then maybe it's some of your language. But really, we all know somebody's boundary and how serious they are by their energy, their body, and their tone. The other day I was at like this track at a school, and I was there with my 2.5-year-old, and a security guard came over, and even before he said something out of his mouth, I knew he wasn't going to do anything. He was like hunched over, and he was like, I'm so sorry, ma'am, and I was like, okay, like, you know, I was going to follow the rules and everything, but he wasn't going to, he wasn't holding his own authority and power in that moment. And there's a way in which we sort of minimize that and sort of maximize that, and what we want to do is just to rest in our healthy power in that moment. So the who is you are the boundary in any situation. The what, let's get really clear on the what now. What is a boundary? So what's interesting is the word, discipline is really kind of what we're talking about when we talk about boundaries. And one of the original definitions, the Latin definition of discipline, meant to teach and to learn. And then in the French definition, they added through punishment. And then in the British English definition, which we now is what it holds, it says the principle or the practice of making people obey rules or standards of behavior and punishment and punish them when they do not. And so we've moved from this place of to learn to actually to punish and to enforce. And I think we need to come back home to this. Boundaries are about learning. Every time you set a boundary with your kid, you're teaching them something about yourself, and you're teaching them something about what you value, and you're teaching them about what you value in that environment. It all comes back to you and who you are. And so one of the things that I think is super helpful is like getting clear on what you actually want to teach your kid. Because we often confuse boundaries and requests. At least I do this all the time. I do not have a great track record of this. But we can request certain things from our children. But that spectrum then into actually setting a boundary, we need to be clear on. So if my son doesn't want to wear his jacket, am I going to set a boundary that day on that or not? Like, for me, I don't actually care whether, I do care. I used to care a lot more, but then I realized I had to set so many other boundaries that one actually doesn't matter anymore, right? He can not wear his jacket, he can wear it, whatever. He needs to, though, put it in his backpack, right? That is then the boundary that I'll So it's like getting clear. I'm going to ask you 2 times, and then am I going to set that boundary and say, like, this is really important and here's why? Or am I going to keep it at a request? Thank you for considering my request. I see that you're not willing to do that. Let's go to school. That's okay. I don't think that's like being blown over. That's making it clear, like, this is a request. I've asked you. I can see you don't want to do that. I'm actually okay with that. Versus a boundary is like something that's non-negotiable. And I think it can be really helpful to get clear on what we want boundaries to be around. And I don't know what that is for you and your family, but I know for me, getting really clear on those things, and kind of these are the rules that we've been playing within our family, which is just no harm. So that includes no harm to self, no harm to others, and no harm to the environment. Okay? I'm going to hold hard to these boundaries, which is like 20% of the boundaries I used to set. And I'm going to let go of a lot of other things that just don't actually matter at the end of the day. Or they don't matter as much as I want to emphasize these things with all of the different transitions and choice points we have throughout the day. So with that, how does that look like? If my child is banging on something, is he harming himself? No. Now, sometimes I can handle his noise level in the kitchen, but other times I can't. And so there are certain days where I'll ask, and I'll ask again, and he'll start like maybe banging then a little bit more quietly, and I'll be like, okay, that level is okay. Any louder, I'm not okay with. That really starts to upset me. And other days I'll have to be like, hey, today is a day I can't handle the noise. It actually hurts my ears and it causes me harm. Like, I need you to stop. I don't have the capacity. So I think that we can also have a little bit of a spectrum here in teaching our children about our needs and about their needs. And so being clear, this causes harm in this way can be a way to kind of help shorten some of that dialogue, that like back and forth around like, no, this is why, and this is what we value in our family. Another thing that has been helpful is identifying what is important and saying, you're Malatik, my last name's Malatik, this is what is important in our family. Like, we don't talk to each other like that. And the other thing that I'll add that helps me is I do not want to talk to you that way, and it's not okay when you talk to me that way. It's never okay for me to hit you in that way. It's not okay for you to hit me in that way. It's never okay for your dad to do that to me. It's not okay for you to do that to me. So there's like these foundational rules, and this is your last name, and these are the rules that we hold to in our family. And then with that, we're going to get more into this, but then it's accepting whatever emotional reaction you get to that, which is going to be different in the moment depending on where capacity is at. So we've got the who. Who's the boundary? The boundary's not out there. It's not somebody else. It's you. You are the boundary. The what? It's about teaching. It's about teaching them about their environment. And when you can bring that teaching component in to the setting the boundary, that's when you know you're going to be more regulated in general. If you can move it into a teaching component versus a negotiation or all these other things. And the thing is with the boundary too, I think, we're going to do who, what, let's get to when here. Okay, so when do we set the boundary? It has to do with your own values. It has to do with what's important to you. It has to do with your own needs. And again, that's going to be kind of different slightly every day. We want to obviously simplify things for our children, but I think it's okay as your kid gets older that there is a little bit, that there's more information around this. And I'd say like by 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 especially. It's very hard, I think, under 3. There's not a lot of cognitive ability going on at that moment when kids are being reactive to a boundary. So let's get into, we did the who, the what, and now let's do the when. Okay, so there's kind of 3 scenarios that we often bump into when we're setting boundaries. And let's look at this from our biology. So if you hold out your hand, this is like your spinal cord. This is your brain stem right here at the back. Right here is like your amygdala and your hippocampus. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this, the hand model. And then your fingers right up here represent your prefrontal cortex. Now, we know that the prefrontal cortex doesn't fully develop in men until the age of 24. And for women, it's younger than that. But all that to say is this area of your brain is it's always growing for a very long period of time. And one of the things that is important to remember with the when setting a boundary is you're going to get likely kind of 3 different reactions. The first one is the prefrontal cortex is online and it is connected to your limbic system and your amygdala and all of that. And so the emotions and the cognition are going hand in hand. There isn't a sense of overwhelm. It's like, oh, I'm curious, I'm laughing, I'm understanding, I'm playing. There isn't this sense of then flipping your lid, which is when the cognition goes offline and we're just stuck with the fight, flight, and freeze response. So this is what is happening to us and our children, right? So our child flips their lid and then we flip our lid, right? It's a parallel process, okay? And then we bring our cognition back on and then they flip it even harder, right? Okay, and then we flip our lid because we see that nothing's working, and then they might start to bring their cognition a little bit back on or begin to kind of try and appease or try and please at that point. And then we come back down with them, they come back down, and then we can, an hour later, have dinner, right? This was last night for me. We had TV dinner because we had such an intense meltdown at the end of the night. So what we need to remember is that there's this parallel process here. And when your child flips their lid, there's kind of 2 categories. There's one where it's you just need to accept the level of intensity and the emotion, and it's just part of that process. There's another type I think of flipping the lid that still requires the same response, but it may require a little bit more resourcing. So an example is last night, let's share all my dirty laundry here. My son came in and he played for just nonstop, been at kindergarten and played nonstop, hadn't had a drink of water, hadn't had a snack, came in the door, we asked him to wash his hands and he just lost it. So he's rolling on the ground, screaming, not listening to anything. We've asked him 3 times and he's escalating, getting more and more, and then he's starting to now lash out and hit one of us. And so, and if you knew my son, you wouldn't be like, does he do this? It's yes, he does. And so his lid is totally flipped at this point. And so continually trying to ask him to do something in that moment is just not going to work. It's not online. And so at that point, we needed to kind of transition, let him settle. Part of that for him is reading a book. Last night it was just actually sitting with him and watching a little bit of a show, putting some food in his mouth. It came online and then we could have a conversation about it, right? That's different than when he starts to flip his lid and doesn't want to go to school, and I can tell his cognition is still slightly online. This is how you're going to kind of know your kid. And it's really important to, again, just validate, recognize this is what you're feeling, and kind of move the situation along. And then he kind of makes it into the car and we head off to school. So those are the steps are, I would say, it's when cognition is online, when you flip the lid, but the cognition is going to come back online, and when it's they're off to the moon and back, and it's going to be a half an hour to an hour before things are really kind of settled. Okay? So there's the when. Any questions? I want to pause here. I also just want to share just a few things. That for these first 2, this is the one that's the high level of escalation. We want to come in clearly with our boundary. We want to come in calmly. My son doesn't do really great with verbal acknowledging of his emotions, so I'll actually say it silently to myself in my own head. I see you're really mad right now. And like that just helps me stay with the body language of I get what you're feeling, it's okay what you're feeling, but not like adding so much verbal feedback that sort of actually makes the cycle worse. So you'll know your kid if they respond really well to that validation or if that kind of escalates them more. And sometimes it's in between. But if you do have a child that doesn't respond really well to that sort of validation, it might just be with you. I know with my son, with teacher Kim, he loved it. Like, he did great with it, right? But with me, it doesn't go over very well. And so they're also going to be different with different people. It's not personal. It just has to do with the relationship dynamics and a lot of things. Did you have a question or comment?
A lot of time with my son is in like number 3, sometimes number 2, just any word, like just a word, and it just makes it.
Yes.
And so sometimes I just am completely silent.
Yes.
I'm not sure if that's the best.
Yes, it is. Yeah, he's telling you.
Waiting, and then with a rub on the back. And
Yes.
And what I worry about sometimes, I guess, is his age, because he's almost 3, I think he's 3.5 now.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if like letting it go 30 minutes to an hour and then discussing it, like is it still getting like
Yes.
getting all the
He
good
is.
stuff from it? Okay.
He totally is. Yeah.
That's a lot of,
Because
that's a lot of energy.
it is usually, I usually do
So
just
sure.
wait, but like it's a full 30 minutes because
Yeah.
even when it's a minor like upset, if you talk too much in that moment, he gets into number 3. He
Yes.
goes to that.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
it's good to know that it still registers after 30 minutes.
Oh, totally. The next day it will. Yes, and a lot of times I have to like do it the next day with my kiddo because there's just maybe not enough time left in the evening and we've got to kind of move things along. It's not actually the amount of time. I don't think you have to worry about that. It's actually just circling back up to a week. I would say even like 4 days. Like any time within that is fine. And go with your gut and what feels appropriate for you and your kid. But yes, it's that nonverbal, right? A lot of our kids are cueing for nonverbal needs, and we're trying to meet their need verbally, and they're wanting it met nonverbally. And what we need to be doing is often a little bit of both, but we need to be more heavy in the nonverbal camp, and that's really hard when we're dysregulated. I know for me, I just like, I want to soothe through my words, but they're asking me to soothe through my body. And so what I'll do, so I don't say anything because my mind starts racing, is I'll start counting. So 1, 2. I'll just like, my kid was losing it in the grocery store the other day, and I just was like holding him really tightly, firmly, like really putting my hand on the base of his spine, just letting him know like, I'm right here, I got you, you're not gonna fall. And then I was just like counting. And then I had to leave the grocery store because it was too much. And then we needed to get a snack, and then we could get in the car. But yeah, that nonverbal communication I think is huge. Yeah.
So you said holding them against your body, that was one form of the nonverbal that they needed. Are there any other forms?
Yeah, so for me, sitting down and reading a book, my child will come to me and want to sit next to me or around me. But I'll say, hey, I get you're really upset. I understand that. I'm going to sit here and read a book. You're welcome to join me when you're ready. Sometimes that'll work, sometimes it won't. The other thing is, if you do want to engage verbally, is you can say, I hear you're saying this. You're saying that let me see if I'm getting this right. You're saying that you're mad about A, B, C, and D. Did I get that? And sometimes that'll escalate them even more, but sometimes it'll do a little bit more and then start to bring it back down. You just gotta watch for this. You're gonna see this happening, right? And if it's like, whoa, that's not working, then more space, but staying grounded in your body can really help. It's like the wave has crashed, as Kim would say, and says so well. Okay. Okay, so who, what, when, where, anywhere a boundary can be set, and then why. I think this is really getting into, again, your values. What do you want to teach your kid? And this is a great way to kind of just, sit with that no harm. The why is really important, I do think, for setting boundaries. Not as a negotiation, not as something that's going to change, but as the teaching point. Why because like this is really important. As an adult, you're gonna learn this. This is really important because I didn't actually get this as a kid, and here's how you're gonna need it. Storytelling can be really powerful after the giant bomb goes off as a way of helping them connect the dots. I get that you were feeling this. Did I get that right? Okay. This is what I was feeling, and it's really important to me that as Malatics, myself included, we all learn this skill because you're going to need it someday when you're the boss and when you're a parent and when you get to make these decisions. So getting into the why of why you're doing what you're doing. Okay. All right. All right, let's also now talk about what's in our control and what's not in our control with boundaries. Okay. Because, right, we have requests and we have the boundary, but then we also get really blurred around what we can actually control and what we can't control. So, what is within our control and not in our control? Just go ahead and popcorn around, guys.
Ourselves.
Ourselves, yeah. That's in our control. Our own body, yes. What's not in our control?
To an extent, our children.
Yeah, yeah, which parts of them?
Their mind.
Yeah, their mind, yes.
We can affect their feelings, but we can't control them.
Yeah.
Like, we can, as you said, make boundaries that physically impose on them, so we can control their bodies to an extent, but at the same time, that becomes a model that most of us don't probably want to fight, so.
Yeah, totally. A child has the right to their own feelings. Anything that's inside of their own body, that is their right. That is their boundary. You as a parent can't reach in and change that. What we can as a parent is we can provide an emotional environment that helps the child come into connection and attachment. But this child decides when and where and how to do that. You cannot make your kid do that. I think that was the biggest thing. I've read so much about co-regulation and trauma, and the thing is though, like, they have a separate nervous system. And we can't regulate, actually, their nervous system. We can regulate our nervous system, and they can decide to respond to that. But just because you're regulated doesn't mean your kid's going to be regulated. And I think that is missing sometimes in these dialogues, because you can feel responsible for the dysregulation that is in your child, and that's theirs, and that's their right, and that's their space to grow into their humanness. Okay, so we can't control their mind, we can't control their feelings, but, right, we can to a certain extent control their behavior. And right, and I guess a better way to say this is we can respond very clearly to their behavior. I do not hit you, you do not hit me. It is not okay to hit, I love you, but it is not okay. That's never okay, right? And so that's like blocking, that is like holding, that is like, I'm gonna move over here, okay, like let's take some deep breaths, like, it's like letting that wave go, but it's also, when your kid flips their lid, it's like, to a certain extent, you have to let it kind of implode. I mean, I don't really believe in holding our kids down, which I don't think any parent does, but as long as we're communicating, we don't hit, we don't harm each other in that way, let the wave blow over, and then your kid is gonna kind of settle, and then you can come back into connection. But it's hard. Those moments are really hard, I think, for sure. Okay. All right, guys. Now that, anything else not in our control and in our control?
You say our space is under our control too, like the house?
Yes.
Things that are,
Yes,
like
right.
that area?
Yes. And I think that's really important. I tell my kid all the time, you're going to have your own house someday. You're going to get to decide what you do on your couch, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, and you know what? I'm going to come over and you're going to tell me how I can be in your house. Because it's your house. And you're gonna be able to tell me if I can come or go. Because it's your house. But this is our house. And when you live in our house, we have to play by the rules of our house.
I think that's big, because in our house, we do allow jumping
Yeah, we do
But
too.
when we go to somebody else's house,
Yes.
it's hard to for him to understand, like, that's okay at our house, but at this house, that is a boundary that we don't cross.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
it's difficult.
It is, yeah, and that takes some education. I think that, like, you know, with the no harm, I've been kind of playing with this. It's like others, self, environment, but then there's also this piece around no cultural harm. And that, like, culturally, you can't do certain things in this environment because that does feel like harm. It does feel offensive to some people. And it's, like, really important to know the impact of that. It's like when you call grandma Rachel, that feels, like, deeply, like, disrespectful to her. She does not like that. You can try it, but I gotta tell you, you're gonna get this back from her. And it's like, and that's because, like, that's what it feels like for her in her body when she hears that word from your mouth. So it's a small thing, but I think it's good for them to navigate that. Okay, let's talk about airplanes now. All right, so if you are in an airplane, think about the kind of pilot you want in your airplane. There's kind of 3 different types of pilots. There's the pilot that says, it's okay, everybody. There's a lot of turbulence. Just take a deep breath, blow out a candle, feel your feet under yourself. I'm going to land this plane. Don't you worry. And the stewardess is coming around with snacks. So have as many snacks as you like, and we're going to get there, okay? It's just a little bumpy. There's that stewardess, or there's that pilot. And then there's the other pilot that's like, you need to sit down. Everyone needs to be quiet. I'm flying this plane. I know what the hell I'm doing. And you need to all be quiet right now, right? Okay, there's that pilot. How confident do you feel in pilot A and pilot B at this point?
How qualified are they?
Yeah. Just with their sound, right? Just hearing their sound, you get to decide how qualified they are. And the third pilot comes in and is like, hey, I get that it's really bumpy out right now. We're moving through this storm. There's electricity. I know how to fly this plane. And we're going to be landing approximately at this time. If you're able to keep your voices down, that's greatly appreciated. I'll give you an update as soon as I can. Right? And it's again in the tone and the body, the felt sense of that pilot, that you're communicated a message around trust and a message around being taken care of. Whereas what do you get from the other 2 pilots?
So, too much fluff.
Yeah, they're not in control. I think that's the irony, is our kids see right through us.
Lack of confidence.
Yeah, lack of confidence. They see it right in us, right? They're like,
I
oh
would choose
man.
a control freak.
Yeah, totally. So how do we find that really calm, grounded, confident place inside of us? And I think it starts by just looking at, like, who is somebody who embodies that for you? And what are they doing? In your childhood, in your present parenting circle, who has that quality that when they say something, you believe it? And that person often has a high level of congruence. So the congruence, here's the plane. We got the 3 different pilots, 1, 2, 3. I'd like to be on the flight with the 3rd pilot here. And that congruence meaning when you say something, that you feel that connection all the way down and through their body. So sometimes when somebody's incongruent, it's like you could feel something's happening inside of them, but they're expressing something else on the outside. And so it's like, yeah, I'm not mad at you. No, it's fine. No, like, yeah, go ahead, go over there. It's okay. And we do this all day, this incongruence. But I think it's really important to slow down and get as congruent as we possibly can. One of the little girls came over in our neighborhood to our house, and I was saying, okay, well, right now, I was trying to wrap things up. I've got to get in the car, and Matthias has got to get in the car too, so we're going to put our snacks away, and then we're all going to go home. And she looked at me, and she's like, was kind of confused, and she goes, so does that mean I stay, or does that mean I go? And I was like, you go. You go out the door and you go home, and we go out the door and we go in the car, right? She needed that like concrete congruence, like you leave and we leave. And I think sometimes we're so afraid of hurting our children's feelings that we're really not clear, because we're trying to make it so friendly. And that actually being just direct in what is the statement, what needs to happen, can create that congruence for them to better understand what we're asking of them. So it's like when we drop some of that masking, can they better hear us? And can we better hear ourselves? And I think that we can be congruent and we can be mad, right? My tone, my energy, my intensity. I'm not mad at you, I'm mad at this situation because we need to get going and I need you to listen, and I'm feeling stressed that we're not going to get there on time. So what you're hearing in my voice is frustration and worry. So can you please get in your seatbelt, and then we're going to drive to school. And I'll explain more once we're there. So it's like naming what they're picking up on and what is the clear instruction. What are your guys' thoughts here on congruence? When you feel congruent, when you feel incongruent, it's not a perfect thing that we nail. It's just something that we want to like come back to and anchor in as parents, rather than floating up and out and trying to make it sound really kind and nice when it actually becomes really confusing.
Not everything has to be a choice for your child.
Yes.
Like I find myself at night asking, do you want to go upstairs? I'm like, no, it's not a choice.
Exactly.
Let's go upstairs.
Yes.
That's the statement.
Yes, it's a statement. Yeah, and it's a confident statement. And it might even be like a command, you know? It's like, it's this piece of like, is there a question mark at the end of the statement? Does your voice go up? Yeah, my
I
voice.
think as an adult, like at the end of the day, I don't want to make choices anymore. Like I want somebody to make all of my decisions.
Yeah,
So maybe he's just cool with it.
totally.
He's tired.
Yeah.
He made decisions all day. We've given him choices.
Yes.
Now we go upstairs to bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, now it is time to go upstairs and go to bed. Okay. Yeah. Totally. And I think this, last part, and then we're going to open it up to some examples, is the caring hierarchy. And I talked about this a bit last year, but there's an article on the back for folks, and I'll also link it. There's a caring hierarchy that's really important, in that children are dependent on parents to provide the care. There's this thing called an alpha child. We all have alpha. Like, it's a spectrum that I think any child can kind of like fall on. And the article sort of breaks it down, but it's like when the child starts bossing the parent around and begins to take control of the environment. And that happens all the time. And when that's happening, the child's need is actually not getting met, even though they're looking like they're getting their needs met, because they're demanding this and this and this. And one of the ways to work with that dynamic is to not meet the demand, but to begin to meet the need. And the need is, do you see me? Can you take care of me? And can you handle my intensity? And I think like getting big enough, like bigger, wiser, kinder, stronger in that moment to handle that, so that the child can depend on you. Because when a child feels like they can't depend on us for that, then they take control. And I think they can also take control even when we do provide that. But it's really setting up that dynamic, that you're not meeting all of the demands, but you're meeting the need. But you're also seeing your kid, I also want to say. My 2.5-year-old like really needs control over his environment as a way to regulate. And so that is often like, okay, do you want to do a light switch when he's like flipping his lid? He'll like do the light switch, and then he'll want the pillow this way, and he'll want this way, and it's like, okay, all right. So now you want it. And I'm like pausing. Okay, I get that. Now you want this? Okay. No, we're not going to do food. No, we're not going to do candy. But yeah, do you want something to drink? Okay, I'm right here. And so there are limitations within that, and I'm taking him from one thing to another, and as he calms down, but it's like, it can take up to an hour, and it's like, it's okay the way you feel. I'm just right here with you. We're riding this out. No, you can't hit me. I understand you're upset. Okay, what's next? So you can, I think, be attuned and in relationship, but it's not like that desperation of like trying to fix the problem immediately. Okay. Any thoughts here? Anything you guys want to hear more on when we think back to some of our questions?
Positive and negative reinforcement.
Okay, yes, thank you. I forgot about that. All right, let's talk about, let's talk about this. Rewards and punishments.
Seems like our 4-year-old does not respond well to the negative.
Yeah,
And
I
so
don't
I think
either.
punishments will increase in intensity and severity until you listen, but we both have different styles of parenting.
Yeah. Well, I think that this is really tricky territory, and I think it's important to kind of figure out what works well for you, and it's like staying in that place again of owning the fact that you are taking care of your child. Your child isn't taking care of you or like running the show. Like you're the adult in the room, and you're the one that can actually meet their needs in that moment. And so what are the needs that are there? So it's like figuring out what is within the like we will meet these needs, and what are the needs like we won't, or requests we won't meet. Okay? So for my child, it's like we will do during meltdowns, like there's certain things that are in that sphere, and there's certain things that are out of that sphere. And we will move in relationally and like we'll have a snack, we'll have some water. Depending on the situation, like we may watch a video or something like that. But figuring out what that is for your family, I think, is number one. And then I think number two is then figuring out with the rewards and the punishments, it's like, I think that this place is, here's what I've learned. I'll just say what I've learned. The rewards and the punishments are tricky because it's so dependent on the kid and it's so dependent on how it's being delivered. But the biggest thing to keep in mind is that when you reward and when you punish, it becomes about these things versus like what are you trying to teach or what are you trying to have happen in that moment, which is often a moment where we're kind of looking to connect and accept where the child is at and then come back into whatever the task is. So can you give an example so that we can actually kind of workshop it if it's okay?
Today,
Yeah.
after grocery shopping, trying to clean the house, and was like, I need you to pick up your Legos in the dining room, or
Okay, great.
in the kitchen,
Yeah,
the dining room.
yeah,
It was an entire struggle,
yes, yeah,
but it was, instead of, if you don't do this, you won't get this, it
Yeah.
was, if you clean up all of your Legos, you can get 3 pieces of candy.
yeah, yeah,
You know, and this was probably an hour and a half to 2 hour struggle,
yeah,
wanting to play with Legos, and
yeah,
finally got him to get everything taken care of. And then I told him at the very end, I'd make sure that everything is picked up. All the Legos are picked up.
yeah,
I was like, you get 3 pieces of candy.
yeah.
If I see one Lego on the floor, you get 2 pieces.
Mm-hmm.
So we actually went and did another quick sweep
Yeah,
to make
sure.
sure that everything was there, but was a struggle.
Yeah,
My
how old's your kid?
Tone, language, everything. Like I even told him how frustrated I was. It's been 30 minutes of trying to get you to clean.
Yeah,
So
totally.
Yeah.
How old is your kiddo?
4.
Okay, great. All right, so I think asking children to do a task is again, is challenging. Here are some tools in the toolbox. I think that bringing play in and being collaborative around a certain task can be helpful in sort of kickstarting the expectation that he cleans up Legos. So it's like, hey, like I totally get that, you don't want to do it all by yourself. Let's make a game of it and see how many baskets we can make and do that together. But we've got to work together, okay? So I'll do one, you do one. So it's like you can bring that collaboration in that way.
He really loves to do that with
Okay.
everything. I actually took the broom and dustpan, to try, like,
Yeah.
you'll be able to pick up these
Yeah.
Legos super quick with the dustpan.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of gave him some, I don't know, newfound hope that it wasn't gonna take forever.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
a couple of Legos at a time
Yeah,
versus, hey, you know, you got 30 of them scooped up, you know, in
yeah,
10 seconds, this will be done. But yeah, he really wants, help me
Yes.
with this, do
Yes.
this.
yeah. My
So
kid
we've
was
lost
the same.
steam on, I'm done helping you.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like that's, you
Yeah.
don't wanna do it.
I think that like as your kid gets older, right? And so it's like it's building that tolerance for the amount of the task that they do alone, and building that over time. So it's like with any learned skill, and it's also then like starting to kind of build their own confidence that they can do that. Again, I think it's different in school and like sort of what happens in the group-based environment because other kids are participating. Teachers are holding the boundary in a different way than parents are. I do think, and the other thing is your kid's gonna be on a spectrum of 2 years under the age they are and 2 years occasionally above the age you are. So your kid's, 4 and you're working at times with a 2-year-old and you're working with a 6-year-old, depending on the day and depending on what time of the day and depending on what are the activities that you've done leading up to that point in the day. Have you just are you really connected? Or are you guys in a place where you're having to kind of move from one thing to another and there's a pace to that and there's a rush to that and that's coming off of a school day, right? There's just a different capacity with that. And I think that understanding okay, where are we at? What's the appropriate task and ask here? And then how can we begin to actually connect and what's the word I'm looking for? Reiterate, you did that, you did a great job with that, thank you for your help. And then next time, let's go ahead and try and do how many more Legos? Let's see if we can do that. So,
I also threw a punishment aspect in there too.
yeah,
Because I said, if I have to do this, all your Legos are going to the Goodwill.
yeah,
And he was, no, Dad, no.
yeah,
But that wasn't the motivation to get him to clean it.
yeah,
I guess it was the dustpan, I think, that really kind of
exactly,
helped out. But
yeah. I think that you're gonna get more out of collaboration and not necessarily rewards, but collaboration and relational participation than you're gonna get out of punishment. And the treats are fine, but at the end of the day, what do you wanna teach your kid? It's sitting down, I want you to be able to keep your space clean. I want us to be able to work together in this. And so I think coming at it sometimes more from a relational and a clear expectation of what is the smaller task that we can do today, and then tomorrow can we try, or a week later, something kind of a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger, and build that over time, knowing you're still going to have days where they're 2 years younger and they're not going to be able to do that. But yeah, getting ideas around that of how to collaborate, how to bring in a play.
flipping the lid, and there's nothing I can do right now, maybe for the next 15, 30 minutes.
Yeah, exactly, and that just puts you in a
Redirect,
spiral. Yeah,
Distract him.
yeah, totally. So it's the play piece. It's the play piece. I think it's the making the task more tangible and smaller, and then it's also asking them what's a fun way we could do this together, or what's a fun way you could do this for a few minutes, and then I'll come help you, and then you can do it. And again, his sort of capacity in that moment to kind of move through the task. Yeah, it's hard. I hear you. Okay. All right, we've got just a few more minutes. Let's see here, you guys. The other thing I want to just talk about here is the importance of tumble and contact and play. If you have a high sensory input kid or a kid who's got a lot of energy and a lot of intensity, it's likely that they need a lot of that sort of contact, that wrestle, that sort of put them in a burrito, squish them, lift things with them. That sort of play is not what kids get necessarily at school. And so bringing that in before you ask them to do something is also going to be a way that you're going to get more buy-in. If you wrestle with him for 5 minutes, just getting into it, like pushing, laughing, playing, like make some game out of it, and then say like, hey, now can we work on this for 3 minutes, and then can you finish it up, buddy? See how that goes. If you connect before the activity, especially physically, you may get a different experience, because the kid's going to be more regulated then, they're going to feel connected, and they're going to feel motivated, generally. Not all the time, so don't set the expectation too high. But yeah, I think that can really help. So really making sure that you get in that rough and tumble play, slowing down and resting with your kids, sometimes just like laying down on the ground, like having that moment where everybody just like pauses and isn't on technology or phones, can be also a really nice way to kind of begin to bring in some of the connection to help support the collaboration and the respect around boundaries. The last thing I just want to say is, that our children need to feel a sense of safety, protection, attunement, delight, and support, encouragement. If you can fill up some of that before you or during a task or while setting a boundary, that then creates that imprint with boundaries. And it doesn't mean, again, your kid's gonna like it. You're not always gonna be connected to your kid when you're setting boundaries. But I think staying within a relational space where it's like, I see you, I get it, I understand, I don't like doing things too, let's work together, that's gonna in general get you farther than the meltdown command pattern. Just, it's gonna build a different bandwidth in your kid over time. And then you can kind of give them more and more and more. All right. Okay. So let's walk through one last example here. Everybody grab your sheet of paper and take an example that you have of this last week or any time. And let's talk through from beginning to end. You can kind of draw this out, what happened. And what we're going to do is you're going to track you and you're going to track your child, kind of like what are the main events. And really check in with yourself, and what did you notice first kind of with your body at sort of these different points from beginning to, let's say, the end, however it ended, whatever ending point you want to look at. So when you felt kind of what you essentially noticed with how you were communicating the boundary with your body. When you were clear, when you were unclear, when you were congruent, not congruent. Just kind of begin to like map that out for yourself. And it might be easier to just do your child first and then kind of yourself. Not your child's body, but just like their responses. So, as you were moving through your experience, like, what were you doing with your body in those moments?
So just pick any.
Yeah, pick kind of like, just like sort of your points. Like, if I took my meltdown last night, it was like I was on the couch, I was like looking at my husband, I was like feeling panic, and then I was like spoon feeding my children. And then if that question's a little bit hard for you, you can jump to the next one. So that's kind of like, what did you see? What did you kind of feel? What did you experience in your body? And what were you needing? What were your needs in those moments? And then if you have a moment, what were your child's needs? And if you can separate that from the demand, like what were they really needing? Maybe in that moment, emotionally, non-verbally. If you could do it over again, how would you and where would you want to bring in calm, and what would that look like? How would you and where would you accept their emotional response? What emotions in particular just needed to be accepted, acknowledged in that moment, whether verbally or non-verbally? And then how might you collaborate? Like what might you, if you, with your kid, and kind of moving through that moment? And again, like there might be a play component here. There might be acknowledging, like just a whoa, that's a big feeling. Yeah, I get it. Like, what were you needing right there? That counts as collaboration. No, we can't do candy, but can you tell me a little bit more about why that upsets you? Oh, you were really wanting to do the pumpkin carving. Okay, I get that.
Can I give you a situation?
Yeah, just one second here. Yeah. So just kind of mark that out. How would you do that differently? Calmly accept and collaborate, or connect is another way. By collaborate, I also mean connect. It doesn't, I'm not saying do everything your child is saying. It's like, how can you come into emotional connection with them in that moment? All right, anybody want to share something? And then I'll get to your question here in a second. Anything you want to do differently? Anything that you see now that you didn't see back then? Yeah, go ahead.
Something that I like to do in my house is just create space where my child can be having big emotions when I can't. What I've noticed a lot is the biggest issues come when, like, I'm cooking dinner, or I'm doing something that I can't fully step away with and be, like, fully in the moment.
Yeah.
And, like, one really big thing is I have a 3.5-year-old, I have an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And their interests are different. Little brother is playing with big brother says his boundary, doesn't want to play anymore.
Yeah.
Little brother's gone
Yeah.
to the moon. And sometimes, a lot of the time it starts to happen around dinner. And
Yes.
so I think maybe controlling the environment more,
Yeah.
like watching what's happening right before I start dinner, or like having space so he can go have his meltdown, because he's like, the nonverbal is his thing. He doesn't
Yeah.
want to be spoken to.
Yeah.
And then I also don't want to like make big brother
Yeah.
like, put his boundary down.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time it's just like wailing going on when I can't fully be there.
Yep.
So maybe like, controlling the environment better, and then having space that he can express himself when I can't be in that moment 100%.
Yeah, totally. So just share with folks who are still online here, and then we'll just wrap up here in just a bit. But yeah, this piece of controlling the environment. What can I do in the environment? And how can that maybe shift some of the experience? And the other piece too is like, how might you connect before cooking dinner may also be a piece of just like reading one book, like for 2 minutes, right? And then also reading a book like when you're done, or like starting dinner with a book sometimes is even, it's like, where can those touch points of connection come in before, slightly during, and then after? Again, knowing that's more, it's easier said than done. Absolutely. Yeah, dinner's hard. Totally. I've yet to crack the code. I don't think I ever will. Yeah.
Dinner or just a phone call?
Yeah, a phone call can be really hard. Yeah, I think technology is the other piece I wanted to bring up here, is our kids are so used to having our split attention because of technology. And it's like that, I think all those little micro moments also add up throughout the day. And what is it like when there can be just like a period of time where there is disconnection from other things, and just to focus on connection with your kid and building that up. And if you can build that into your routine, they have that expected time, and reminding them of that, I think that also can help build up that tolerance too. Yeah. Totally. All right. Anything else you guys want to share before we wrap up here?
In a moment.
Yes,
when,
go ahead.
So my situation was like this afternoon, I was getting things ready for us to come here, so I was getting them an early dinner, getting a sandwich
Yeah.
put together for both the kids, and I'm on one side of the gate doing something, the baby comes up and is trying to get my attention, and something my 4-year-old said, I responded to, and I can't remember what the question was or what he had said. Whatever I said angered him.
Yeah.
And so he's across the room, like, then throwing pillows off the couch or throwing stuff at me. But how do I create a boundary, I guess, like, without physically do I just gently put him down and, this is unsafe, you're gonna hurt yourself or your brother or me, and it's
Yeah.
not okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Just use your body.
Yes.
Like, hey,
Because
like bring,
my body
'cause
stayed on the other
he's-
side of the gate.
he's wanting to
Yes.
feel you, and he's calling for your attention.
Yeah.
And so coming over, doing some contact, making some play, like, I'm gonna squish you, I'm gonna squish you. Okay, now let's like run over there and run back, give me a high five. Okay, I'm going back to the kitchen now. And so it's like, can you bring that physical contact in with your kid on some level? They often want that rather than the behavior.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, see what that offers as a form of connection, and whatever feels like, available for you in the moment. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
I've wondered about the boundary, like, my kid hits me out of frustration, or mad about something, and I say, it's not okay to hit me, I won't let you hit me.
Yeah.
But then other times, if we're wrestling and play fighting and
Yeah.
laughing, and he's hitting me, but we both know it's a game,
Yeah.
is that sending like a mixed message, or do you think kids just know like the difference between it's not okay to hit out
Yeah.
of anger, and when we're playing it's
Yeah.
like a different,
What do you want to teach him?
to understand the difference,
Yeah.
like, and the intention, like,
Yeah. So I would tell him that. I would play the way you guys are playing, and then break it down for him. So when you come up to me and you push me from behind, I'm not okay with that. I'm surprised. It's not within the context of play, and I'm not responding in a way with laughter. But in this environment, like, these are the rules. This is the boundary in this environment. Outside of this environment, this behavior is not acceptable because it's not in this context. And so it's like you're creating that container for them, and then you're pointing out, like, hey, if I just hit you right now, would that be okay? You'd be like, maybe. You'd be like, no, it wouldn't be okay. But if I like said, let's wrestle, and you said, yeah, let's wrestle. Yeah, we both agreed to wrestle, then we can wrestle. And there might be even certain types of hits. That hit's a 10. This hit is a 2. We don't do level 10 hitting. We only do level 2. Level 10. Nope, stop. Play has to stop. We're at 10. So it's like you're also giving that feedback, and you're teaching him about consent. Because unless the other kid knows like that, and like, okay, and you can role play that with him, which is so helpful in so many areas for boys, because they don't get as much of that, again, during the school hours, understandably. Yeah. Okay, last question, and then we'll wrap it up for folks online.
I'm not a big wrestler, so we have actually done things like, we have to get consent before we wrestle in my house.
Yeah.
Because I have had like so many times my kids have been like,
Yes.
I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
So we have an affirm, like, you have to get consent from the other person.
Yeah.
That you're going to wrestle.
Yes.
And that's how they know.
Yeah.
Anything other than that is considered like a hit in our house.
Yeah, totally. And my 5-year-old, like when he has too much energy, comes up behind me and slams me up against like the wall, or slam me up against like the counters. And like every time it's like, hey, I turn to him like, you've got really good energy. We don't hit. Let's go do this. So you redirect as well. So when the behavior is coming out of like that tank of like just needing to release the emotion, give them the release valve before they choose how to do it in a tantrum. And so I think if you're having a lot that's going on in your household, it's like building up the physical play, I think, and giving containment around that, and then see how that shifts the relationship through that too. Okay. The last thing I just realized I did not share is how to regulate in the moment. You had brought that up. So there's the counting to 10, that, just like grounding yourself, counting to 10, and giving yourself those 10 seconds before you say something. I think there also is this piece of rehashing it with someone who you love and who supports you, and saying, in this moment, this is what I felt, this is where I was overwhelmed. Can you see and understand that I'm trying to do this better? Have that person validate what your intention is, what you're trying to learn. I think letting someone in that space where it feels really tight and overwhelming and why it's that way can then help change the lived experience of that as you kind of track some of the memory around that, and also then some of the pattern around it with your own kid. So it's like talking to someone, sharing what's hard about that moment, what do you feel in your body, what you're trying to do in that moment, can that person really see that? And then counting to 10, and then not being afraid to say like, time out, time out, time out, I need a break. My anger is getting bigger than me right now. I need to get in control of it. Let me take a break and I'll come back to you. Or transitioning into play. If you can be setting a boundary and transition into play, and that's gonna actually help you set the boundary, I think, sometimes more than like moving into a mode that then you later regret. The last thing I'll say is repair. Repair, repair, repair when we do move into modes that we don't like, because a child will always remember the repair over the actual experience, because the apology always carries more weight. It's just always true when it's sincere. So that's just another way we work with changing in our nervous system over time. Alrighty. Thank you guys for being here tonight, for unpacking this topic. That article's in the back. I'll send out some resources too of some things that have been really helpful for me and podcasts. And the last thing I'll say is there's also the resources as well of therapists, couples therapists, and family therapists. If you want to just do a few sessions, get some information and some support, that's always a great idea too, if that feels like a good resource for you. Thank you guys so much. Enjoy your night.
Thank you.